All right, so this is Napolean Chagnon, a cultural anthropologist whose studies of the indigenous Yanomamo, it's said differently, of the Amazon rainforest made them famous, but whose methods provoked intense disputes amongst other anthropologists, died on September 21st. So this is about him. So he collected data over decades, and he was in there. He was like really back in, because the Yanomami, they live deep in the Amazon rainforest. So they've been contacted for a long time, but they have like access to some, and they did even then. This is like the 70s and 80s. They had access to better weapons. You know what I mean? They had like access to some modern weapons. I think eventually they got shotguns and stuff, but they had a lot of machetes. And his data showed that 44% of Yanomami men over 25 years old had participated in killing someone, and that 25% of Yanomami men were killed by other Yanomami men. And that men who killed were more highly esteemed and had more wives and children than men who did not. So, I mean, and the controversy is essentially that this wasn't true, that how could these people who are in this state of nature do this? They're living in this... There's this view of native peoples in a lot of the world, especially coming out of post-World War II anthropological ideas, that it's this noble savage idea. It's the idea that they are peaceful people, that there is peace amongst them, that they might even be Marxist. I think that in some of Marx's writings, he described hunter-gatherers and basic people as very peaceful and living in a state of kind of communism. And while certain traits of certain people could be called communist in a way, it's really a misunderstanding. I spoke about this recently with Stone Age Herbalist, because what we were talking about was how amongst the Khoisan people, these are people who live in Southern Africa, they are hunter-gatherers that hunt and gather food, that they do share their food when they kill a giraffe. They have a big hunt, they kill a giraffe, they share the meat. So they share all of that meat with even other villages, because there's so much meat. And that's not necessarily like... That's not them being great. That's not them being just magnanimous, good people. That is them... that just makes sense, because the meat's going to go bad. And so it makes it very practical to share, because you can, you keep those kinship bonds. A lot of... In a lot of world history, kinship bonds... The kinship bonds are very important. Okay, and a lot of trade in the past, not like modern capitalism, not like for the last 500 years, but a lot of trade in the past, even in Europe, Asia, all different places, trade was as much about building relationships. It was much about just having a transaction with someone else as it was actually getting goods that you wanted. And that's not always true, but there are a lot of cases of this. So the noble savage mythos, yeah. So it means different things at different times. It means different things at different times. I agree with him as well. I mean, it seems like he did good research. He kept the research and he posted it, and people were just not happy with the result. But they didn't have any credible attacks on his methodology or what he had done. And to be honest, like, if you have this view, this Marxist view, which I do not, but if you have this Marxist view of these people as being just basic human beings that are in this state of early communism, it's something that's good. It's not something that's bad. They're not going to be violent. People assume that they're not violent. So if you produce research that conflicts with that idea that they have, which is like they have an ecclesiastical attraction to that idea, they're not willing to give it up, then they are they're not going to listen to you when you tell them that they're violent. But these people are living in a state of nature. They're living in a place where there hasn't been over time a lowering of the violence. So it just makes sense that they would kill them. They would kill each other a lot. And it's not in every case. I mean, there's very different groups of indigenous people. Indigenous people are the most diverse group of people in the world, because for many times they didn't have these influences, these globalist influences that have, you know, really brought there's been a divergence of culture in the West. So like there are specific differences even within states and regions in the US. Like I live in New England and I'm very different and I live in a different world than somebody who lives in Arizona, but a lot of things that we do are the same. We're on the same internet, we might watch the same shows. Whereas 1,000 years ago, a Paleo Indian, 2,000 years ago, a Paleo Indian living in Connecticut is going to have very little to do with a Paleo Indian living in Arizona. So there's more diversity, and these people happen to be more violent. And he even says in the article that men who killed were more highly esteemed and had more wives and children than men who did not. So that's a clear incentive structure that would point men to kill other men. And when you live in a society where you gain status through direct violence, especially in a society where possibly the influence of Western culture, of people coming in there with new technology that's more efficient at killing, it's possible that there was less killing back in the day before, but the weapons made it easier and made it more common, and there was a kind of an arms race. That type of thing happens. It's happened, you know, you can even look at that, you know, in Europe. It's not like early Europe. This isn't a thing that's like just something that non-white people do. And when you see how he was attacked, it is cancel culture before it existed. Yeah, I totally agree, man. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's just, you can't just get, like, the reason that I have a show, right? Like the reason that people watch Illegitimate Scholar is because the anthropology, well, this is my perception, so tell me if it's wrong, but the anthropology, like how I do anthropology is, I take it from a different perspective than most of the people that do it. Because most of the people that do it, they're like over 90% liberal. They're mostly, like in America, they're liberal. They're heavily liberal. So there's, people come into that with certain ideas about, people come into the field and they leave the field and they are in the field with certain ideas about politics, and those affect the field.